Hi everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to my session where I'm going to take you through some tips and tricks on how to create a more inclusive workplace. Now, before we dive in, I'd just like to take a moment to give a big shout out to all the sponsors. Without these great companies providing sponsorship, events like CloudEight wouldn't be able to happen. So please do take a few moments to go check each of them out and get in touch with them if you'd like to know more about them and what they do. My name is Zoe Wilson. I work for a UK Microsoft partner called Agilysys Limited. Now, I work in the professional services leadership team as the Director of Innovation and Customer Success, but my background is in SharePoint. The Twitter handle SharePoint Zoe probably gives that away a little bit. But in the time I've worked at Agilysys and my current role, I get to work across the entire M365 stack and the rest of the technology that we work with as well, helping people to understand the art of the possible with the tools that are available to them. Now, I've been working with SharePoint in one form or another for more than 15 years now, and I've spent the last 5 years in leadership roles. As well as SharePoint, I work across all the rest of the content and collaboration workloads as well, such as Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and the Power Platform. And a big part of what I get really passionate about is accessibility and inclusivity and how we can use the tools that we've got available to us, both to access the systems if you've got, disabilities or things where you require it to be made a little bit easier for you, but also actually how we can make more inclusive content for those people that we work with. Now, I'd love for you to follow me on Twitter, find me on LinkedIn as well, or you can get in touch with me by email if you're enjoying the session. Please do ask questions in the chat. Put your hand up if you want to jump in. I'd much prefer to get it being interactive if we can. All right, so moving on to what we're going to cover today. Now, I am going to be covering quite a lot of ground in this session. So we will move quite quickly to get through all of this. But like I say, please do jump in if there's anything that you want to ask. So over the course of the last 15 months, we've seen a huge change in how people work. Last year, the whole world went into lockdown, and what that meant was that we saw a massive shift to remote working, which was underpinned by tools like Microsoft Teams. And we achieved a level of transformation in months, which would normally take years to achieve. However, for a lot of people, adapting to this new way of working has been quite challenging, either because they've struggled with disabilities or with feelings of isolation, with the lack of social connections to colleagues, and with having to find new ways to get work done with systems that they may not have been that familiar or comfortable with. So in this session, I'm going to share a few key tips with you that could help you to create a more inclusive workplace. And this is very much going to be a presentation of 4 parts. So the first thing that we're going to do is to start with an overview of features that can help make your life easier if you've got accessibility requirements, by showing you some of the top accessibility features that are built into Microsoft 365. And then I'll show you how you can use some of the built-in features in Word and PowerPoint specifically to create more inclusive content. Then after that, we'll take a look at social connections and how you can use Teams to create and strengthen social connections, even when we're all working remotely. And then lastly, we'll take a look at how you can run more inclusive meetings in Teams. And I'll give you a tip here for free. This isn't a technology problem. This is absolutely a people problem, but we'll come to that at the end of this session. So before we get into that, I figured it would just be useful to pause for a moment to understand what we mean by accessibility and why it's so important. Accessibility is literally the ability for people to be able to access systems regardless of their personal circumstances. You can see some examples on the screen of different types of accessibility requirements, and it's important to note that they may not all be permanent either. So I'll give you a real world example of this. Last year, one of the architects in my practice broke his shoulder in a cycling accident. And this was his dominant hand, which meant that for a short while he struggled to work effectively. However, because of some of the features that I'm going to show you today, he was able to access the systems and he was able to continue working, albeit a little bit slower than he normally would. I'm also frequently on calls with parents as well, who are either having, they're either having to hold their child in one arm while they work, or they're having to keep them quiet and they can't actually hear what's going on around them as well. So those are perfectly valid situations where accessibility is important and the tools within the Microsoft 365 platform can help. And then, of course, if you've got people who are visually impaired, people who are neurodiverse, learning difficulties, dyslexia, people who have got hearing difficulties, these tools can all help those as well. Now, I'm going to show you some of the features available within the Office apps that can help from an accessibility perspective. However, what I would say is that I'm barely scratching the surface with these. I'm just going to show you some of the kind of key features. But actually, the accessibility features in M365 is a whole session just on itself. Um, and across the whole of the Microsoft 365 stack, from operating system through to the Office apps, the mobile apps, the Edge browser, Teams, all of them have got accessibility woven through their very DNA. So I'd highly recommend that you look into those. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you is the Microsoft Word Dictate feature. And what you can see in the GIF on the screen is on the ribbon, when you open Word at the top, on the ribbon, you've got the little record button. And when you hit that and start speaking, it will actually start transcribing what you're saying. Now, I'm showing you this within Word, but actually you can find this in the other Office apps as well. So you'll see the record button when you go to create a new email. You'll see this in PowerPoint. You'll see it in OneNote. And the dictate feature is pretty good now at understanding accents, and it's improved significantly over the last few years. So you can tell when the dictate button is switched on because you'll get the little red recording symbol and you just start talking. You can dictate punctuation, you can see that it will capture the words, and then once you finish a sentence, it can actually correct words that have been picked up incorrectly based on the context of what you were saying. So this is a super, super useful tool. And then staying in Word again, the next thing I wanted to show you is the Immersive Reader. The Immersive Reader is a brilliant tool that caters to a range of accessibility needs. The Immersive Reader provides a range of tools that can help people sustain attention, improve reading speed, improve word recognition. It reduces the visual crowding, so the amount of stuff that you've got on the screen, and can make it easier for people to understand the words that they're trying to absorb. Being able to change things like the background colour can make it easier on your eyes and can help people who are visually impaired, as well as making it easier for people who are suffering from fatigue as well. And then being able to break words into syllables and reducing the amount of text that you've got on the screen at one time can also help people who are dyslexic. Now I'm showing you Immersive Reader in Word, but actually Immersive Reader is available across the platform as well in the same way that the dictate feature is. So in the Edge browser, you can view sites using the Immersive Reader. You can see this built into OneNote. You can see this in Teams as well. If you click the ellipsis next to a Teams message, Immersive Reader is one of the options that comes up. And I've talked about accessibility in Microsoft 365 for quite a long time. And one of the very first times that I did this, I did this internally for colleagues, actually. And we had an apprentice in our HR team who's autistic, and he came up to me a couple of weeks after I showed him the Immersive Reader, and he said that it had absolutely transformed his life. And that for him, the ability to be able to control the amount of stuff that he was looking at made it so much easier for him to be able to read emails properly and actually understand the meaning that people were trying to convey. So this is a really, really powerful tool. Now let's move on again. So the next one, another one that I'm showing you in Word, but also available across the platform as well. And this is the read aloud feature. So the read aloud feature is the opposite of dictate, really, and it's one I personally find really useful. Under the review tab on the ribbon, you'll find the read aloud button. And once you press this, it will start reading from where your cursor is. You can change the reading voice, you can change the reading speed, and the highlighting of the words as it's moving allows you to follow on in the document as well. So this is another useful tool for people who struggle with reading. And actually, it's a really effective way to be able to consume documents without being tied to your screen. So I use this myself as a way to review long documents that I've created or that other people have sent to me for approval. And when you listen to something rather than reading it, it's processed by a different part of your brain. So it's a great way to test whether something actually sounds right. And you can use this in the mobile apps as well. So again, another really great way to be able to review stuff, when you're moving around. Now, the last one I'm going to show you in this section is subtitles in PowerPoint. What I'd recommend is that, if you're presenting, get in the habit of turning on subtitles. And I haven't done it on this because it reduced some of the GIFs I've got are quite small. But as you can see, when you turn on subtitles at the top and then go into presenter view, it starts listening to what you're saying. And then as the presenter is speaking, it will actually start putting captions at the bottom. Now, PowerPoint isn't the only place where captions are available. You can actually get captions in Teams meetings as well. And for those of you that might not have seen it, I'm just going to show you. So if you go to the three dots here, you'll all have the ability to turn on live captions. And what that will do is turn on captions for you as an individual. So there are a few nuances here around how we can be inclusive to people. Now, if you turn subtitles on in PowerPoint, that will give subtitles to everybody. But the limitation in a Teams meeting is, if I'm co-presenting with someone else and I turn subtitles on, it will only pick up what I say. It won't pick up the dialogue from the Teams meeting, and it won't pick up the dialogue from the co-presenter. Whereas if you encourage people to use live captions in Teams, that actually picks up all of the conversation, and it uses something called speaker attribution to actually put the name of the person against the caption as well, which is super powerful. Now, again, in PowerPoint as well, you've also got the ability to use subtitles in a different language. And I'm going to bring this deck in here. I'm just going to show you where that is. So let me just stop presenting. So we've got the always use subtitles at the top, and then under here we've got subtitle settings. So if you're presenting to an audience where English isn't their first language, or whatever your local language is, there is actually a range of languages in here. So I can speak in English, and I could set the subtitles to, to German or French or Japanese, and the subtitles then would automatically be shown in that language. So again, if you're presenting to people who speak a different language to you, this is a super, super powerful way to be inclusive. Now, that's the end of my first section. I have actually got a bit of a demo in. So I've just shown you the PowerPoint subtitles. And the other thing that I just wanted to show you in here was the immersive reader. So if I'm in a Word document and then I go to view, under here, you've got these options here. So I can click immersive reader, and then that brings up all of these settings where I can start to control how much stuff is on the screen. I can change the settings, and I can essentially get this to the format that I can best absorb the content in. So that's super, super powerful. Now, moving on then to the next section. So we've had a look at some of the features that are available from an accessibility perspective. And what I wanted to just talk about now was creating more inclusive content. So up to studies show that, so in the UK specifically, studies show that over 11 million people in the UK are disabled, and up to 70% of these disabilities are hidden, whether it's hearing, whether it's eye conditions, whether it's neurodiversity. And when we start to look across other countries, obviously those numbers just increase. What this means is that there's a good chance that some of your colleagues and customers have disabilities that make it hard for them to engage with your content. And it's really important to think about the fact that if the stuff that you produce is not accessible, you could be excluding people from participating without intending to. And there are some really simple and easy things that you can do that will make it easier for people to participate. It's easy to do. It's the right thing to do. And actually, I'd go so far as to say that we've got a moral and ethical obligation to be more inclusive where we can. And a bonus, actually, is that we increase the reach of our content as well. Now, before we move on, I just want to point out that the feature that I'm using in the GIF that you can see on the screen. So this is the accessibility checker, and I'm just going to come out of the slides again in a moment and show you this. But this is something that you should get into the habit of running on all your documents, because it will automatically flag issues to you. And even more importantly, it's going to tell you how to fix them as well. So if I come into my little Word document here and then turn on this. So under review at the top, you've got this check accessibility button. I'm going to hit that. And I've deliberately added some things in here that I know that it's going to flag up. So it's telling me that I've got a merged cell in the table. It's telling me that this is hard to read text contrast. So the contrast between the background color in the text isn't clear enough for people who are visually impaired. And it's also telling me that I need to add alternative text on this picture of my cat as well. Now, I'm going to tell you in a moment when we get back to the slides why these are important. But the other thing I just want you to know is this checkbox here. So what I'd recommend when you're creating content, whether it's slides, whether it's documents, is to turn on accessibility checker and go and tick this box. And then as you create the document, it will flag things to you straight away if you need to do something about them. So let's go back to the slides. So like I said, that, accessibility checker is the first thing that you should do because it's just going to help make your life easier. It will always flag to you alternative text for images. And the reason for this is that it will help people who are using screen readers understand what the purpose of the image is. So if you add an image to a document and you don't set alternative text, you might as well have not actually included the image at all, as the meaning will be completely lost for those people who are using screen readers. Now, it is possible to do things like mark images as decorative, so a screen reader will just ignore them. But again, if you don't do that, a screen reader is going to try to explain everything that it finds in a document. Now, another important one is to use styles to define headers or sections. And this is really important from a navigation perspective. And again, the benefit of this is for people who are using tools like screen readers, because the screen reader will use the navigation within a document to be able to navigate the clues in the name, really. Tables. So you'll see I've got tables in this twice. Now, tables are an accessibility nightmare, and they're an absolute bugbear of mine, particularly when you start to get people who are merging or splitting cells. And one thing that I see quite often, we'll get documents that are sent into us, which will just be the whole document will be like a massive form in a table. And what happens then is people fill the form in and they'll start putting tables inside this massive big table. And the reason it causes problems is that the way that screen readers work with tables is to count through the cells. So, they'll literally count rows and columns. So they'll count along, they'll count down. And when you start to merge cells or split cells, or when you start to nest tables inside tables, it's super, super, super easy for a screen reader to lose its place. And again, if you're trying to get important information across in the table, and particularly if your whole document actually is a table, but the screen reader can't follow, again, you might as well have not bothered including it in the first place. So this is really bad practice, and I'd recommend from an accessibility and an inclusivity perspective, it's something that you should try to avoid at all costs. And the side benefit of using tables less is that they can be quite painful to co-author as well, because Word will try to lock up a whole table if someone's editing part of it. So again, if you've got, like a multi-page document that's all tables, that can start to be really painful. And then the last one, again, this was flagged by the accessibility checker that I've just ran. But the last tip is around avoiding hard to read text contrast, because it's difficult for people who've got different types of visual impairments, and it makes it hard for them to read the content. Now, the good news is that the accessibility checker will pick up on all of these issues and other issues as well, and it will tell you not only that there's an issue, it will tell you why it's an issue, and it will tell you how to fix it. Okay, so moving on to PowerPoint and how we can create more inclusive PowerPoint slides. PowerPoint by its nature is a visual tool. So it's important to make sure that your slides are clear, that they're easy to read, that content is on a slide, the content on a slide moves in a logical order. And as with Word, the first thing that you should do when you're creating PowerPoint slides is to turn the accessibility checker on and to keep it running while you work. Again, in PowerPoint, set alternative text for any images, because if someone's using a screen reader to explain what you've got on the slides, especially because PowerPoint slides tend to be more visual, it's super important that that you're putting alternative text in, or that you're marking things as decorative if they are logos or background images. Ensure that slides have got titles. So in the same way that screen readers use styles in Word for navigation, in PowerPoint they use the slide titles. So it's important to ensure that slides have got titles and that they're unique as well, without duplicates. And the reason that we say not to have duplicates is, imagine if I had 4 slides that were called Creating More Inclusive PowerPoint Slides, and someone's trying to use a screen reader to navigate to that. They won't actually know whether they're finding the right one. So it's about trying to give them meaningful names, but making sure that we don't have duplicates. And if you have a slide that, it might just be like one big image, you can put a hidden title on there. So you could put a title, above the top of the slide, so that when you're in presenter mode, you can't see it, but actually it's still being picked up as a title, which will benefit people who are using screen readers. Again, in PowerPoint, avoid using hard to read text or color contrast, and avoid making content on your slide so small that it can't actually be viewed by people in your audience. You want people listening to what you have to say rather than focusing on squinting to try and make out what your slide actually says. And in the same vein, I guess, don't try to put too much text on your slides as well. Try to keep it nice, visual, high level, so that the slides are just supporting what you're saying. You're not giving people tons of stuff to try to struggle to read through. And then the last one is using logical reading order. If you've got multiple artifacts on a slide, then a screen reader will read through them in a specific order. So if those things are out of order, then again, the slide's not going to make sense. But as with Word, you can use the accessibility checker to flag up all of these issues, and it will help show you how to fix them as well. Okay, so moving on to section 3, let's take a look at how you can use Microsoft Teams for social connections. In research shared by Microsoft, nearly 60% of people who were surveyed, now this is research that's come out over the last year, 60% of people surveyed feel less connected to employees since working remotely more often. And the experience of working for an organisation, it doesn't only involve the rational part of the brain. We're creatures of emotion, and without a physical office and being able to shake people's hands, without having that physicality to help transmit values and the vibe and the ethos of an organisation, we need to look for other ways to create that feeling of culture and mission and connection. So I'm going to give you a few tips on how you can use Teams to do this, on how you can try, keep that culture alive and have some fun in the process, hopefully, as well. So one good way to do this, and something that I've done a lot over the last year, is using Teams to run social events. Now, Helen Keller famously said, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do much." And I absolutely think that is true. Research shows that I think over the last year we've seen an increase in Teams meetings of 55%. So we've all got 55% more meetings in our diary on average than we had 15 months ago. So that increase it's been relentless, and being in back-to-back work halls can be mentally exhausting. So it's super important that you create the space within your organisation for off-topic conversations. And I've got a few suggestions here for ways that you can do that. So virtual coffee mornings, whether in a group or encouraging people to book one-on-one virtual coffee breaks to get to know their colleagues better, can be a really good way to encourage people to stay connected with their peers and to show them that it's still okay to take time to catch up with people and talk about things which are not necessarily work related. And in the same vein as that, if you don't need to share content in your meeting and you're just having a one-to-one call or a team catch up, get away from your desk, get up, go outside, get some fresh air, go for a walk and take the call on your mobile instead, and have a bit of a walk and talk meeting. Sunlight and fresh air is good for us, and it's the one thing we've absolutely not had enough of, particularly over the winter lockdown. So it can be a great way to connect with your colleagues while also being able to disconnect from your screen a little bit as well. And on a personal note, I think one of the things that I have seen over the last year is one of the things that I've really felt the difference of is losing those water cooler conversations with people. Everybody has meetings in their diary which are kind of for a purpose, and you want to get something specific out of it. But people, I think, have become so focused on that you actually lose the ability to connect with people as humans and individuals. And I think these first two suggestions are really about helping bring some of that in. And for me personally, being able to go and even if it's just walk around the block, it makes such a difference to my mental health. Some of the other things that I've done over the last year or so as well. So I've used Teams to run lots of bigger group events. So things like virtual quizzes, challenges, team scavenger hunts. So the team scavenger hunt that we did, everybody joined the Teams call on their mobile device, and they were set the challenge to go and collect a number of items from around the house, with a new item being announced every minute. Now, obviously, I started it with a bit of a health and safety warning because I didn't want anybody to get a broken leg or anything like that. But actually, it was a really fun way to get people to connect, have a bit of a laugh, and to get them moving around a little bit as well. I've also used Teams with platforms like Crowdpur and Kahoot to run virtual quizzes. So the way that I did this was to, have a Teams meeting that everybody joined to run the quiz with cameras on and people having a drink in hand. And then putting the quiz into presenter view on my desktop and then sharing that in the Teams meeting in the same way that I'm sharing my slides now, really. And then people being able to answer the questions on their mobile. And we've had great success with these. We've had loads of fun. We've even shared system audio and had music playing in the background as well. And again, this particularly over winter, I think, with people with it being kind of darker and people were just more miserable generally. One of the things that I was really worried about was people feeling socially isolated. So activities like these can be a great way to help people connect with each other, particularly if you've got people in your team or in your organisation who live on their own as well and have been even more socially isolated. Another way that you can use Teams to improve the feelings of belonging and connectedness and social cohesion is the praise feature. Now, I know this might sound a bit trite, it's just a praise badge. How important is it? But actually, peer recognition is super, super important. It's a super important component of people feeling engaged at work. And I've loved the praise feature since it was first released in Teams. I'm giving people a shout out on an almost daily basis when they do something good. But one of the things that we've done over the last few months, which has had a really big impact, is to create our own custom praise badges. And you can see some examples on the screen, which are aligned to our corporate values. You can create whichever you want, but this can be a really great way of increasing that employee engagement and can be really key to improving those feelings of social connection as well. Okay, so we're on to the last section. The end is in sight. And in this last section, I'm going to talk to you about how to run more inclusive meetings. Now, meetings have always been a little bit of a minefield anyway, tending to be dominated by, those louder, more assertive people. But since everybody moved to working virtually, and now actually, we've got hybrid work on the horizon, it's more important than ever to ensure that everybody has a chance to contribute. It is absolutely vital that we provide emotional and psychological safety within the confines of a meeting to ensure everybody has the chance to have their say and make their voice heard. And like I said at the start, this isn't a technology problem. This is a people problem. And the fact that we're all remote, or that we're hybrid with some in a room and some at home, it just makes it harder to manage. But thankfully, there are a few things that you can do to help. Now, I'm going to share some practical tips for things that you can do before, during, and after the meeting to make sure that your meeting is as inclusive as possible. There may be some other things that work for you or your organisation as well, but these are the things that work for me. And if you don't already practice things like this, I think now is a really, really great time to get this in place before before we see the rise in these hybrid meetings as people go back to the office. And just to put that into context a little bit, I'm sure you can all remember before the pandemic, before we all went into this global lockdown, if ever there was a meeting with about 10, 12, 15 people in the office and you were the one person who dialed in, you might as well have not joined the meeting. Because when you've got a lot of people in a room who are giving energy to each other and feeding off each other, it's super, super difficult as a remote person to get to get in there, to get your voice heard. So I think it's really important that we think about this and that we give people the tools to help them manage this if we're going to be in this kind of hybrid situation for the future, if this is just how we work now. So before the meeting even starts, there's some really important things that you should be doing to maximize the success of your meeting. It is absolutely crucial to define the purpose. What is the point of the meeting? What are you trying to achieve? What is the objective or the decision that you need to make? And then this purpose, along with a clearly defined agenda that's circulated ahead of time, will help the people that you invite assess whether they are the right person to attend. And it's also important as well to ensure that you're not inviting a cast of thousands to a meeting where you actually need, you need to get a decision made or something like that, and that you're only inviting the people who need to be included. However, an additional challenge actually is trying to make sure that your invite list is diverse as well, so that any decisions that are reached include a diverse set of views. Try to share any materials that people need to read ahead of time. I think some people cope better if they've got time to read, read an agenda, read the supporting materials, and prepare and consider before coming to a meeting where they're being asked to make decisions. So, for people who like to work like that, springing everything on them in a meeting can put them at a disadvantage. So by being thoughtful and intentional and planning properly and sending this ahead of time, you can help maximize the chance that the meeting will be a successful one. And lastly, I'd also recommend sharing ground rules in advance as well. So, what meeting etiquette will you follow? How do you expect or need people to behave? And if you share this in advance, along with an agenda and any pre-reading, that will help set you up for success. And, just to kind of extend on this a little bit, if you get a meeting invite where no one's had a conversation with you, you just get a meeting invite, there's like 20 people on it and a title and no information. Is it really the best use of your time to turn up to that if you don't actually know what the point is? You might get there and realize that it's a complete waste of your time. So actually, this is it's really respectful to give people the information to make sure that, if they're not the right person, you can get the right person on. So, just a few simple things you can do before the meeting that will help. And then we move into the actual meeting itself. Now, it's fair to say that all of our diaries are extremely busy at the moment, so it's super important to make an effort to stay on topic and stay on time as well. Be respectful of the fact that people have given up their time to attend and that they've got other time commitments as well. So it can be helpful to do things like park any off-topic ideas and subjects and have a separate follow-up meeting to ensure that you stay on track and increase your chance of meeting the objectives that you set out beforehand. And then when you start the meeting, set out the agenda and the objectives and go through the ground rules again. Just make sure everybody knows what it is that you're trying to achieve. Encourage people to switch their cameras on. Now, I know it feels a bit weird if you're not used to it, but body language is a really key part of communication, and it can really help in understanding the points that people are trying to make. If people aren't comfortable, inviting their colleagues to see their home environment, then using custom backgrounds is a really safe way of being able to use your camera without having to necessarily share your surroundings. And the way that we've approached this at my organisation is to create some corporate backgrounds as well. So, if people are presenting to clients, they can be on camera and they've got a nice corporate background. So there's some really great options there to make people feel comfortable. As part of your ground rules as well, I would encourage people to stay on mute if they're not speaking, to minimise any distractions from background noise, and then to use the raise hands feature if they want to contribute. This will allow you as the organiser to be able to call on them in turn, and this reduces the impact of people interrupting or talking over each other. And it can also help prevent the meeting from being dominated by those louder and more assertive people that I mentioned before. And then just following on from this, I'd also encourage you to call on people to contribute as well. I've been on lots of meetings where only a small percentage of the attendees actually spoke up, while actually everybody on the call probably had something valuable to contribute. So at the end of each discussion point, it is worth going around the room, both physical if there is one and virtual, and calling on all of the participants in turn, ensuring that everybody's got the opportunity to speak. But it is worth remembering, some people might be in less than optimum surroundings for speaking. You might have that parent who's got a child on their lap or someone who's travelling. So allow people to contribute by chat as well, and monitor the chat for what people are adding. But if you are using the chat in a meeting, try not to kind of have a separate conversation, because that can be really distracting as well. Now, we already took a quick look at the subtitles feature in PowerPoint earlier. I'd strongly encourage you, like I said, to turn this on when presenting, or to encourage people to use live captions feature as well. And for those people who are in a noisy environment, the live captions can help make it easier for them to follow on. The live captions, like I mentioned, does include speaker attribution, and I'm going to show you in just a minute what that looks like. And then my last tip for ensuring that your meeting is inclusive whilst you're in the meeting is to use things like the Forms meeting add-in to capture decisions or viewpoints and votes. And one of the benefits of this is you might have some people who are scared to speak up because their opinion is different to what everybody else is. But if you capture this in a form, you could be more likely to actually get honest feedback where people are not actually comfortable speaking up. So I think, I love the Forms meeting add-in, and it's a really great way of being able to get feedback and engagement from everybody. Now, I did mention speaker attribution. I just wanted to show you what this looks like. So this, you can see this in action. So if you press the little three dots and turn on live captions, this is the experience that you'll get, where it actually puts the name of the person next to the comment as well, which from an accessibility perspective, it makes it really easy for people to follow along with. Okay, so we've done the prep, we've sent out all the pre-reading, we've made sure we've got the right person on the call, we've had the meeting, everybody got the chance to have their say, it went really well. And now we've got to the after the meeting bit, and there are still a couple of things yet to do just to kind of close the loop. So first of all, I recommend that you provide the opportunity for people to share feedback, both on the meeting topic itself, but also you can ask for feedback on whether the meeting was inclusive or whether there was any bias that you perhaps not identified, or any opportunities to improve as well. You can share a summary of the meeting with all of the participants, thanking them for their time, providing the minutes, actions, links to the meeting recording and the transcript. And if there are any additional stakeholders who have an interest in the outcome of the meeting, but perhaps who are not required to be in the meeting to make the decision, this is a really great time to widen that communication loop and send those follow-up communications to those people as well, to ensure that everybody's got the information who needs it. You can use tools like Planner to assign tasks to people with deadlines and outline clear next steps, and then afterwards schedule any follow-up meetings as well, making sure that you follow this same inclusive process. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this session. I just wanted to summarise quickly what we've been through today. So we've had a quick look at some of the accessibility tools in M365 and how these can benefit you as an individual. Like I said at the start, this was a very, very, very brief whistle-stop tour of those actually, and there are tons and tons of really great things out there that I'd encourage you to look at. We've had a look at tips for making your content more inclusive, so you can help make your content more accessible to colleagues and customers, and you can increase the reach of your content as well. And the main recommendation there is to just go and turn on Accessibility Checker and let that do the hard work for you. We've looked at some ways that Microsoft Teams can be used to strengthen social bonds across your organisation. And we've finished by going through a few tips to make your meetings more inclusive as well, which will ultimately make them more successful and more productive. Each of these things alone can help you create a more inclusive workplace. But if you take lessons from all of these and apply them to your organisation, your team, or even just your own daily working practices, it will help you drive forward inclusion in a positive and constructive way. And I just wanted to say thanks so much for joining my session. It has been an absolute pleasure. I'd love to hear from you, either if you've got any questions in the chat or if you want to come off mute. But please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter as well. And you can find out more details. You can ask me questions, find out more details about all of the things that I've covered here today. And I just wanted to say I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions at this event as well. It's a really great lineup.